Ladies and gentlemen, in celebration of this 9th edition, this particular podcast, we now present a musical rendition for your listening pleasure. All right. Is this the paper? I'm right off of this. Okay. Number 9. Number 9. Number 9. No. What is this, a song? What for cactus song is this? All it says is number 9 over and over again. What's this got to do with wrestling? It's the outdated wrestling hour. Okay, strap in. This is going to be a bumpy, long ride, but a good one and a funny one, I think. We have Craig Peters, my compadre from Pro Wrestling Illustrated, who I worked with for 6 years. If you've ever had questions about PWI, you may have them answered in this 2-hour, 33-minute interview with Craig. I'm proud of this. It's going to be a really different kind of podcast this time. Obviously, our longest one to date. Pop some corn, pop open a bottle. 2 old wrestling pals talking wrestling for 2.5 hours. Let's get into it with the one and only from Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Craig Peters. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's fantastic being here. I applaud the podcast, and I want to start out, if I may. Can I applaud your first advertiser? Is that legit?
Sure.
Am I going? So
absolutely.
We're going to talk about wrestling in a minute, folks, but I just want to salute Harold Lanes in New Hyde Park, because I also grew up on Long Island, and I was such a jock in high school. My varsity letter was with the bowling team. So I rolled many a frame at Harold Lanes. So I will salute them for sponsoring this podcast, and I will echo Bob for what he said on, I think it was episode 4 or 5, episode 4, that it's a great place. So just want to put that out there and salute those who support good stuff like this.
I guarantee you, if you walk in Harold Lanes now, and this is not putting them down for it, if you walk in there now, you will say the place hasn't changed a bit.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
It's like music arenas. You want them to have a little bit of soul to them. A little bit of flavor.
I'll have you know that I continue to kegel Harold Lanes twice a week.
Nice.
I am still a somewhat competitive bowler. I do have one sanctioned 300 game, my friend.
That's awesome. I never came close to that, but I haven't bowled in years either. So,
and I have bowled in tournaments all over the country at this point. I am not a great bowler. I would never say that, but I'll put it this way: I hold my own. I've had my moments. I've been in first place. I've been in last place.
Has there ever been a bowler gimmick in wrestling?
I don't recall.
What a great foreign object.
What a bunch of foreign objects. 11 of them, yeah. Yeah, that would be, yeah. How would you make that work?
I don't know.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Have the guy laying akimbo in the corner and then roll the ball between his legs? That's not going to work.
Pull a bowling pin out from under the ring, smack him over the head.
Boop. Yeah, right. Well, anyway, it's good to see you. I started with Pro Wrestling Illustrated and its sister magazines at GC London Publishings in 1988, and I was hired after a sit-around meeting with all the editors of PWI. Do you remember that, Craig?
I don't. I wanted to ask you about that because my time at the Apter mags or the Weston mags, the London Publishing mags, was from 1981 till 1996.
Right.
And I was trying to remember back to when you began, because I know, of course, you did the 500 and all sorts of good stuff. And I guess we'll talk about that in a bit. And I consider
myself the Martin Short of GC London, and I'll tell you why.
And why is that?
Because the whole cast was there. You guys were all there.
Okay.
but John Candy left. Right, John Candy left SCTV,
Right.
replaced by Martin Short. Now, that's me with you guys. I don't know who left PWI, but you hired me in '88. I still don't know why. I don't know
Oh, yeah.
why. Was it
Who would
Joe Bula or somebody that had left? Or
I don't know. Who would you have replaced?
well, I think it was Joe Bula, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe. Might have been. Joe was with us for a very short time.
Right.
A year or two, something like that. I mean, the whole timeline just blurs. It's
It
boy,
does.
it's
It
it's
does.
it's 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 hard to.
So, although while I was with PWI during what I call the glory years of the magazine,
Yes,
I was the last editorial person in that time frame. There's no question about that.
right. So what do you remember about your interview?
I remember Rosenbaum, you and Andy and Bill and Stu and
Oh, so Andy Rodriguez was there already. Okay.
yeah, Eddie was already there. Yeah.
Yep.
And you all sit and grilled me. You all sit in a circle. We all sat in a circle, and I told you about myself and why do you want the job, and I explained it.
Huh.
And then after you all talked to me, it was time for my writing test, and it was about Sergeant Slaughter.
That was
And
standard. I think
I
everybody
went,
got the Sergeant Slaughter.
oh boy, I love the EWA. Boom, 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 Wally Carvo, boom, 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 Al DeRusha, bang, bang, bang. I knew the name of the janitor, boom, 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 boom. I said, I'm getting this job. And I got the job.
And you did.
I did. I think Mike Tyson helped a little bit, if you really think about it. You know that I had covered Mike Tyson's first 20 fights in Catskill, New York.
That's right. That's
And
right.
those were the clips I used to get the job. I
And
won,
well,
I
and
won
were
a
you
major
expected?
journalism award for an interview I did with Tyson when he turned 20 years old. And I think that was the best thing I could have ever given London Publishing to try to get a job there.
And so when you were hired, were you expected to do some boxing writing also?
I did. In the beginning, I don't know
Was
if you
that part of the
recall.
job initially, or
Yeah, I did 3
okay?
boxing articles. One was about Tyson beating Spinks, I think.
Okay.
And it was good. The article was good. I mean, I remember Rich Countess turning to Stu, and he didn't know I heard this. Rich Countess from the boxing department. He turned to
Right.
Stu. It was the first article I wrote for the boxing. He turned to Stu and said, "They don't grow on trees." Talking about my writing, and I
Nice.
went, "That's just what I want to hear." You know. So I figured I did a nice job on that. But somehow I convinced Stu that I'm here for the wrestling. I
Mhm.
said, "This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to do wrestling." He said, "You sure?" I said, "Yeah, I prefer the wrestling. I know a lot about the wrestling. Here's how much I know about the wrestling, Craig." When I walked in there, I thought, I'm the perfect candidate. And here's how I proved it a few years later. Stu walks up to me with a picture of the Sheik stabbing somebody, but all he saw is an arm.
And you knew
He
who
goes,
the arm was attached to.
yes. He goes, do you know whose arm this is? And I went, Amarillo, 76. I went, Jose Lothario. He goes back into the photo archives, right, and looks for Jose up, because you would put the photos, you'd file the
Right.
photos with
Exactly.
the guy up, and that's exactly who it was. He
Oh, that's
fell on the
great.
floor.
So I don't know who you replaced at the magazines, but yeah, there was. Um, I guess the point, we used to have um, initiations of new editors, and uh, it was it was a strange office. It's hard to describe to people unless you actually worked there. But
Yes.
it was a fun place to work. It was very loose. It was horrendously politically incorrect in so
Yes.
many ways,
Mm-hmm.
but we got the job done. We never missed a deadline.
Not even close.
And,
Not even
you know,
close.
and I think a lot of that had to do with, the kind of thing that I would tell writers also, if you're having fun writing the story, the person's going to have fun reading the story. And I think that was sort of the same thing with the office atmosphere. The office was a fun place to be. And as a result, the magazines were a fun place to be for readers. I think that whole attitude just carried over.
Yeah. I always took that credo. I remember you saying that, and I always use that credo for every job. If you're enjoying what you're doing, the people who eventually get their hands on the magazine are going to enjoy it too. If it's rushed,
Exactly.
if you're cutting corners, people will tell. They can always tell.
Yep.
It's kind of easy to see the difference. And the other thing about our wrestling magazines, and we always use this expression too, is that we were journalists who just happened to like wrestling instead of
Yes.
wrestling fans who are trying to be journalists.
Yeah, and that's no no disrespect to any other
Right.
magazine out there over the
Mhm.
years, but yeah, I mean, we would sit around and have arguments about the Oxford comma,
All
and
the time.
I remember one time I wrote to William Safire, who had the New York Times on language column. I forget what the issue was, but I still have his postcard that he wrote back to us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we took it all very, very seriously. Although, now I look back, there's a great Twitter feed. It's the Twitter handle is Wrestle Magazine. I don't know if you follow whoever it is on Twitter. I'm not sure who it is, but every once in a while, Wrestle Magazine will tag me in a tweet, and it'll be an article from the early mid '80s, one of the magazines, and I'll take a look at it, and that just needs editing. How did we let that go by?
Right,
But
right.
but we took it seriously. We really did. And in episode 4, I was really happy to hear you give a shout out to Ken Morgan,
Oh, I'm glad you
because
heard that. Yeah.
he's really the unsung hero of
Yes.
the wrestling magazines. And I'll give you a real example of why that's the case. If anyone that looks at the magazines that were produced on Long Island, now we're getting really geeky about the magazines here, but you open them up, you look up to whatever from like the early '80s up through 92, somewhere in there was when the company moved to Pennsylvania. You might remember
Right.
because I know you didn't make
I
the
think it would
move.
have been 93 because I don't know if you remember, I kept coming in. I had a key. Even after I left full time, I worked for about another 6 to 8 months freelancing.
Okay.
So I was still writing there, and I know in '93, and I think I left. What I got, I hate to say this. Sandy Krebs at Main Event called me and said, "You want to write for me?" I said, "Why would I do that?" And he showed me the dollar amount, and I said, "I have to write for you." That's why I did it.
There it
It was
is.
something like double or triple what
Show
Thunder
me the
was
money.
paying me. I had to do it.
Yeah, but it's so if you look at the magazines, I'm talking visually of what they were right before we
Right,
moved to Pennsylvania to right after we moved.
right.
Ken Morgan did not make the move. He was incredibly talented, and
Yes, he was.
we had to hire all new designers. And these are designers who didn't understand wrestling. They were just
Right.
they knew the software for how to put a page together. So you would get some headline like I don't know, the incredible savagery of Bruiser Brody and the bloody whatever it was.
Right.
And there would be like this cursive font used in the headline that, like I Love Lucy font. And it's like, no, no, no. Like you had to explain to the designers that, this is something different, the story. Yeah. So, when the company moved,
Young hero of GC London. There's no question about it. Everybody talks about us because we wrote. Our names
yep,
are more prominent. But Ken Morgan made it work.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
he really did. And he's a great guy too. He's a tremendous guy. Last I heard him, he was with Tops, I think.
That's last I heard as well. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's a
Yep.
perfect job for his skills because he's got the touch for sports cards. I could see him designing sports cards in my mind's
Totally.
eye. Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I I think back on those years, and so like I said, I started in '81, and that was like the tail end of the crazy years. Um, the tail end of oh my God, Bobby, what happened to your face? Bobby
Right.
Heenan with the mask of blood,
The blood covers, yes.
and and you could just write the story from any angle whatsoever. It didn't matter how absurd it was. As long as you were filling 3 or 4 pages, that's what mattered.
Oh man,
Um,
I would go
and I
back
wrote
to
some crazy stuff.
well, I'll tell you what, when I first started there, I was fascinated by the binders. The binders of all the back
Of
issues.
the old magazines, yeah.
And I would look and go, here's an article about the mummy splitting in two in the ring, which was a
Yeah.
photo effect. Oh, here's a story about Bruno Sammartino fighting the Nazis. Here's
Right, yeah. He was not happy about that. Was
no,
the
he was
one
not.
time I think that Bill Apter caught a little heat.
Yeah,
Was
well,
yeah
rightfully
from
so.
that. Yeah.
Don't exploit it that much, pal.
Right.
It's like, But then
But yeah,
again, if you go back to Stanley's era,
yes.
he had stuff that was way more inflammatory than even that stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
and the apartment wrestling preceded you, right?
No, I actually I wrote a couple of apartment
Oh,
wrestling stories.
geez,
Yeah, but most of them were written by Dan Shockett.
that seems about
Um,
right. Yeah,
and the giveaway, like Dan had a signature to every story, and I think I mentioned this on Brian Solomon's podcast. But if you go back and actually read the apartment wrestling stories, because everyone bought Sports Review for the articles, um, he Dan had a signature that he would put in, and it was a sentence that went, "It was a blank exhibition of wrestling blank." So in one article, he'd be describing the two girls fighting each other. It was a furious exhibition of wrestling brutality. In the
right.
next issue, it was a brutal exhibition of wrestling anger. Next issue, it was an mind-blowing exhibition of wrestling whatever violence. But it was always the same sentence construction. It was like a Nina in one of Al Hirschfeld's caricatures. It was always there. That was Dan.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So anyway, the glory years. You and Bill and Stu, Dave Rosenbaum. Those to me, those were the glory years. Even before I got there, 88 things were changing.
They were, yeah. Well, even a little earlier than that, 80, 86, I think they probably started changing.
Yeah, and
But yeah.
I thought I was a curse because the longer I worked there, the worse sales got. I mean, I don't know if I had something to do with that, but I just remember the constant sense of panic, and I remember management's idea of stemming the tide for waning sales was to put out more product.
That's right.
I'm sure
Well,
you remember those days with PWI Weekly and
oh, I
oh yeah.
hated that thing.
Uh,
I hated
hey,
PWI Weekly.
dude, I just remember
It
writing the
was
whole
tough.
frickin' thing a lot. I
It
remember
was
writing both
tough.
sides of that thing, other
Well,
than tabulating the match results. I even did the trivia contest, the trivia questions. I used to love doing that. True or false? Sputnik Monroe invented the wet nap moist towelette. I'm sure
True.
people went home rubbing their chins, going, did he?
He might have. Hey, Mike Nesmith's mom invented whiteout. It could
That's right.
be.
It's possible. Yeah, sure.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, oh God, it was. So we had PWI, the wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Sports Review
Review
Wrestling,
wrestling.
Wrestling 83, 84, 85. We had that one. Wrestling Superstars. The cornerstone of that was the Dream Match. That was another one I hated writing. That was because it had to be long. That
Yes.
was most of the articles ran about 1,000 words, but the Dream Match, I think that was probably about 2,500 words, which
Yes.
is a lot.
That's right.
That's
Those were so intricate, those Dream Match
Yeah,
articles. That's right.
they were
That's
very
right.
intricate, and there was always a lot. Yeah, but you get into the groove, and you put the backstory in and whatnot. What else did we have? Wrestling Bad Guys, which I
Yes.
wish I had a couple of copies of because
That
that was
started that started late in my tenure there. Yeah. Somebody said, let's put out a heel book. And I thought it was a
yeah,
great idea.
yeah. It was that was a
I,
fun
I
idea. We did
and I
poster
believe a
books.
contributor to that was Joey Styles.
Yes, Joey's. Well, when you mention Joey Styles, I think back to the atmosphere of the office that we talked about earlier, being a fun place.
Mhm.
And, again, we had a good time, and it was just the atmosphere of the place was one of creativity and one of goofiness. And Bill Apter had a little sound machine on his desk, and you press one button, you would get a rim shot. You press another button, you would get like an alarm sound. You press another button,
That's
something
right. I
else.
remember that.
And Joey Styles, it was always, Joey Styles, ba-bum, ba-bum, he had his rim shots when he came in. One of the secretaries, Natalie Carollo, she had her theme music. I always had the music uh, from the dance of West Side Story queued up on a little cassette player. And every time Natalie would walk back into the editorial bullpen, da 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 da. Dun, dun,
That's right.
and she loved
Oh
it.
my
It was
God.
it was like
Yeah.
the wrestlers had their theme music, so she had her theme music.
Right.
But it was like that. It was just a fun, creative place to be, and it bled into the magazines.
I remember And I don't even know if you know this, but I was the original
Probably not.
host. I was the original host of ECW.
Very briefly, right?
I did it on the
Did a
QT,
couple?
basically on the QT. I knew if I went to Stu, they want me to be on television. He'd go, no. I just know he would have said no, unless it's this
Right.
PWI all over. He didn't want me to do it. I did it anyway, right? And it was this little Channel 7 in Philadelphia. We did about 6 editions of it. And I was the first host. It was like wraparounds of match films and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
It was just this simple little show. Me and Todd Gordon.
Todd Gordon, yes.
Yeah. But then they had me and Stately Wayne Manor do play-by-play of a card at the Philadelphia Chestnut Cabaret of early Eastern Championship Wrestling matches.
Okay.
I remember finishing up and going, God, that sucked. I said, that's ugh. I never went back. I said, I didn't think I had the resonance in my voice to be a wrestling announcer. I didn't think I was the right, I had long hair at that point, looked funny. I said, this isn't going to work. Now, here's the deal, though. It's 30 years later, and the WWE Network they had a hidden gems section.
Okay.
They had an ECW section within that section, and in it was that card.
Wow.
And
so you got a chance to hear yourself years later.
I never heard the original tape because I just walked away. I said, Todd, I don't think I have it. You should look around. It wasn't that bad. It really wasn't that awful. But here's the best part of this story. I remember Paul Heyman came to the office, and all of a sudden I see him and Joey Styles locked in the conference room.
Uh-huh.
And I could smell the bread cooking.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That was the beginning. Do you remember this? That was the first time.
Well, Joey had that kind of hunger too.
Yeah.
That Paul had when he was younger.
Mm-hmm. And they were just famous. They were in there. I could see hands waving and people going like this. And it was like, something's going on in there. And I went, this is great. I was really saying I think Joey's going to announce for them.
Right.
I said in my head right there, he's going to announce for them. Soon enough.
I had a similar but different experience when we were doing the first PWI videotape, Lords of the Ring.
Right.
And we were in Jersey with the producers Jeff Otto, John Berzicelli, and Bill and Gordon were hosting it, Gordon Soley.
Right.
The Walter Cronkite of professional wrestling. And he was great. He was one of the guys in the business I got to know very well, and he was Gordon. You know, he was a character and just very interesting to be around. But you know, they're doing voiceover for the match clips that we had, and there was about a 2-minute piece of video of a Tully Blanchard match. I forget who the opponent was, but I had seen this video clip, 40, 50, 60 times, something like that. And I just wanted to try it one time. I said, I want to get in the sound booth and see if I can do a voiceover, for the match. Let me just see how that works, see what it's like. And Gordon's like, all right, just go in there and do your best, Gordon Soley. All right. So I go in and I put the headphones on and I'm in the booth and they run the tape. And in those 2 minutes, I gained such an appreciation for Gordon, for any sports announcer, not only in wrestling, but in any sport that makes it look easy. You could hear these guys, a couple of beers in a bar talking about, oh, this announcer stinks, whatever. That is tough. It is tough to make it sound effortless. It is tough to make it sound interesting. I was horrible. I threw the headphones down. I was like, oh my God, no way. I just gained such an appreciation for announcers of all stripes.
The only thing on TV I ever did that was good or even decent really was when I interviewed wrestlers on Marius Evoldi's promotion. I thought a couple of those interviews went really well. I did Joe McHugh. That's one of the highlights of my career.
Joe McHugh.
I was the only person to ever interview Joe McHugh.
Wow.
He was just kind of always there.
Right.
And I said,
everyone knew his name.
I said, this is my honor to interview the world's greatest wrestling announcer, Joe McHugh. And he goes, world's greatest wrestling announcer. Yeah, I like the way that sounds. Yeah, that's really cool. So that was an honor. I grew up watching Joe McHugh. Are you kidding me? That was great.
Yeah, there's a bunch
Whoever
of
came up with that idea, it was great. It was brilliant.
There's a bunch of embarrassing tape of me and Bill doing our PWI press conferences, and I look at them and I cringe. But the one that I like, the one that it was a lot of fun doing it, and the one that I look back and go, yeah, that came off pretty well, was when we did a thing called Wrestlethon for Joe Pedicino. And Joe had the Pro Wrestling This Week. That was I think it was like a 6-hour wrestling block every week, and he was doing a fundraiser for a policeman that had been shot. And so he brought Bill and myself down and rented us a super stretch limo. And Hooters was involved. The local Hooters chains was involved in this fundraising effort also. And so the idea was that Bill and I would go from Hooters to Hooters to Hooters. Joe would cut away from us in between, the wrestling shows across this 6-hour segment. And Bill and I were supposed to be getting drunker and drunker at each subsequent Hooters. So, the first one, we have our suits on and our jackets. We're, very, very formal and, sound pretty good. By the last one, Bill's got his tie around his forehead, my jacket's off, and we're sloshing around. The girls are hanging all over us. It's pretty funny, and it's out there somewhere in the vast reaches of the internet. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun.
That sounds like fun. I don't
Joe
think I ever saw
Joe
that
was a
one
great
either.
guy.
Pedicino, yeah.
Lost him way too soon.
Hey, if it wasn't for Emmy Yates. Wow. I would not have been the writer I was at PWI. She sent us the Pedicino block from Atlanta every week. Mm-hmm. Remember that? On a VHS tape of like 6 to 8 hours of wrestling.
Yeah.
I watched every frame of it, other than the WWF B show.
I wonder if that VHS collection exists somewhere.
I have a couple
stacks and stacks.
I have a couple of those
tapes in the office.
But we used to send them back to her. That was the problem. Like when we were done watching the NBA tape, as we used to call it, we would send it back to her. She'd tape over it and send us another one. I don't know how we got that great deal with her.
I don't know.
But I mean, they had Continental, they had USWA, they had
they had everything.
They had everything. It was amazing.
Yeah, treasure trove.
Yeah, and they would change up things. They had this little Georgia Federation where I discovered Sid Vicious. I said to Stu, we got to cover this guy. And we chose the match. And Stu goes, I don't think it's any great shakes. I said, give it time.
Yeah, look at him.
I was right about him. I was just talking to somebody about this. One of my great pleasures working there, for some reason I got to write the introducing features while I was there. Remember introducing in The Wrestler, I guess it was? And I know I gave a few guys there for, like Rob Stakowski, who later became Rob Van Dam.
Okay.
In fact, I named the split like a moonsault. He didn't have a name for it. I said, "What's that move where you kind of do a backflip off the rope with your legs spread out?" Like he goes, "Oh no, I never give it a name." I said, "I'm going to call it split-legged moonsault."
So this is breaking news.
No, it's not.
No.
First of all, number one, I did name it, but you know what? I'm never going to get credit for it because number one, I know Rob probably doesn't remember this at all, and it's been picked up by everybody. I heard Jim Ross say it on TV years ago. I went, damn. It's like
everyone listening to this right now knows. So
but that's really true. We just came up. It was just on the fly. He needed a name for the maneuver. So let's just call it a split leg because that's what it was. As you recall, it was a backwards flip.
All right. So I'm going to test your memory here. Can I do that?
Sure.
I know you're supposed to be asking me questions, but I'm going to ask you
one go ahead.
on your podcast. So I'm holding in my hands the sensational 10th anniversary issue of PWI.
Did I work on this one?
Yes, you did. And in our PWI book of lists, we have editor's picks, and we have Bob Smith down here. Mm-hmm. We could go down the list, but it's I guess it's your picks for the PWI years. The greatest wrestler of the PWI years.
Damned if I remember. You're going to have to tell me.
You Ric Flair.
Okay.
The greatest match. What would be the greatest match of the PWI? Now, remember, this is in 89.
Oh,
so you're talking between 79 and 89. Bruno
Tony
Zbyszko
Altidore versus Mike Producer.
Bruno Zbyszko at Shea Stadium. The cage match.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Greatest tag team. The Midnight Express.
Yeah, I would say that.
Greatest feud. Brody
Just tell.
Abdullah.
Oh yeah, I love that feud. That's right.
Favorite maneuver, Snuka off the top rope. Most
Yeah.
memorable moment. This is a good one. Magnum TA's return to the sport at the Crockett Cup in 87.
Mm-hmm.
Hottest prospect for the 90s, Steve DeSalvo.
Oh, damn.
And you want to know your prediction for the next 10 years?
Oh God Almighty. Go ahead.
We all got it wrong, so don't feel
Okay.
bad. There's Eddie Elner came closest, but he was coming at it from his angle. Your prediction for the next 10 years, this is again in 1989. The NWA and WWF will continue to fight it out for fans, but the AWA will also gain in popularity, perhaps because of new management. The WWF will finally ban animals from ringside and will legislate against ridiculous, unnecessary antics by wrestlers such as the Bushwhackers, Hacksaw Doug and Rick Rude, and the Honky Tonk Man. There's a little time
I
capsule.
could not have been more wrong. When
But
did the Undertaker debut? It's like they just went the other direction, of course.
But when you talk about things like great matches and great feuds and stuff like that, it brings me back to something else that you've talked about in previous episodes, which I was really happy to hear you talk about, which is the whole notion of wrestling psychology.
Yes.
And so people have asked me over the years, and I didn't really keep that close tracking of what happened in wrestling after I left. I moved on to other work and other things. Yeah, keep in touch with things a little bit here and there. But I always felt that what makes pro wrestling, or at least what made pro wrestling interesting to me, and I think to a lot of people in those glory years of the 80s,
right,
was you knew that there was stuff that was absolutely made up. The characters, whatever it might be. You knew there was stuff that was absolutely real. If someone's jumping off the top rope, they're hitting the mat. They're going to jam their knees, whatever.
mm-hmm.
What you did not know was the line between the two. And in the dance of that line between the two is, to me, where the fascination of pro wrestling came into play.
Right.
And that's where psychology really
right.
worked. The way that you sort of construct the match. And I heard you talking about some other matches and, like great psychology of great matches. And it brought to mind seeing several 90-minute draws between Flair and Steamboat.
Right.
And just think about that. Like, could they do that today?
No.
A 90-minute draw.
You know what else Flair and Steamboat couldn't do? They would wrestle for an hour or 50 minutes and Steamboat would win with a small package.
Right.
You'd never see that today. Fans would blow him out of the arena.
That's right.
What?
That's
he
right.
didn't try to cripple him. What? Who? He's just trying to win a championship? What's that all about?
But they would go for a 90-minute draw, the standing ovation at the end,
yes,
and fans went home happy.
For both people, for both guys.
Yes.
It was such great athleticism.
Yep.
The best house show match I've ever seen was Flair Steamboat in New Haven, Connecticut. In my life. The best house show match. Mm-hmm. It was the same as you would have seen when they did that little tour after Steamboat won the title. Those matches were uniformly great no matter where they performed.
Right. I believe it. Yeah.
They would never go half speed. They went full speed every time they met each other. And they were fantastic bouts. Holy smokes. Just the best.
And then I think back, just sort of the feuds and the long series of bouts. There was to me, the first one that really sort of got me going, because I was never a wrestling fan growing up. And I've talked about this before. I was a big comic book fan growing up. And when I was hired at the magazines, actually the first time when I sent my resume out, Peter King gave me a call. And, because I'm fresh out of college, I'm trying to get a job doing something in publishing. Peter King gave me a call, said, "Oh, I saw your resume, really like it. Want you to join the staff." I said, "Okay, what do you do?" "Oh, we do magazines." "Oh, that's interesting. What kind of magazines?" "Pro wrestling." I kind of went,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd watched it on TV, Channel 47, Lucha Libre, been to the matches once or twice at Nassau Coliseum, but it wasn't really my thing. it was okay, but I wasn't really into it. But then a couple of weeks later, Peter called me back and said, listen, we really want you to come in for an interview. So I went in and I interviewed, and I sort of got a sense of what this place was like and what they were doing. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot for a little while and see what happens. And a little while turned out to be 15 years.
Right.
But I started going to the matches and, Madison Square Garden, taking pictures at ringside next to Paul Heyman. And the first feud that really sort of sunk its teeth into me was Morocco Morales.
Oh, yeah.
Were those great matches.
People don't even talk about them anymore. They were
they were
really hot
terrific.
matches. Yes, they were.
Blazing hot. And the Garden would go out of its mind.
Mhm.
And I have such a fondness for those early Garden dates that I went to. Special Delivery Jones, SD Jones.
SD Jones. Do your Howard Finkel impersonation for me. I'm sorry. One time back, we're talking about the absurdity of Stanley Weston selling the magazines to Kappa Publishing. Like he said, I could have sold the Condé Nast. No, Kappa, Nick Carabao. So you came. I said, "This is like Ivan Putzi's." I said, "This is like Ivan Putzi's promo." I could have had this match at Madison Square Garden. No, Totewa Ice World. and you,
Totewa Ice World.
You turned into Howard Finkel and said,
"I did.
A fantastic wrestling card is coming to Java Musk." You remember those little promos he used to do in between the matches?
A fantastic wrestling card coming to the Java Musk. Yeah. Yeah, we would do Howard Finkel. We'd also do Freddie. Oh God. People are screaming at their headphones or at their computers right now.
That's right.
WCW, Freddie
Miller?
Freddie Miller. That's, of course, Freddie Miller.
Yeah.
Be there.
Right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
A fantastic wrestling card coming
to Java. Yeah. It just sounded funny, but that's how he said it. Yeah.
Oh man, he's great.
But that was the greatest Ivan Putski promo. I could have had this main event against Bob Duncombe at Madison Square Garden. Yes, no, Totewa Ice World. And it was like, whoa!
Did you ever go up to Allentown?
Yes.
For the TV tapings?
No, for WWF TV tapings. No, but I was proud to stand in the same spot interviewing wrestlers for Mario Savoldi in the same building.
That was my first.
I was the only person in awe of stepping into that building because Savoldi did some of his IWCCW tapings in the same building that the WWF used, and he even used Joe McHugh. And I just thought I just smelled the history in there. I loved every second of standing in there. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, again, another great. You walk in and the walls just bleed history, whether it's wrestling, everything, music. But yeah, my first.
And also on the walls was a sign that said, "For rent." Well, this number.
That's right.
It was just a big hunkin' barn, really. But you know what? It was a barn with history and good hot dogs.
Yes, good hot dogs. And the first time I went to TV taping at WWF, and I forget who was on the card, but I remember very vividly Vince was interviewing Andre the Giant. And Vince, of course, a tall guy. And they had a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had the platform on the floor with a little notch built, cut out of the platform. And Vince would stand in the notch. Andre would stand on the platform. So, there's 6, whatever it is, Vince McMahon, looking up, holding the microphone up in the air, emphasizing Andre's height. It was great. It was like taking a peek behind the curtain.
And the listeners here are going to get used to hear me say this, but I was sitting at home seeing that interview and going, come on. It's like, it was so blatantly
it's just physiologically it didn't work.
Vince was like extending his microphone hand as far as he could into the air to get to Andre's mouth. And I'm like, get out of here.
But it was great. But that was the flavor of wrestling at that time. That was part of what made it great.
Yeah, it was. It really was.
Mike Sharp must have been on that card too.
I love those days. Those 70s and 80s, man, it's just as Mike Laird would say, that's my jam. That was the stuff that I still cotton to more than anything that's happened since. I mean, going to Memphis, holy smokes, what a thrill that was. I remember I took a wrestling vacation. You remember that? Around 89 or so, I took a wrestling vacation. No, it was 91. It was 91.
Yeah.
So I'm going to Memphis. I called Jerry Lawler. I said, can I get passes, to cover your cards? He said, come on TV. So I went on TV 2 days in a row. I went on not only the Channel 5 show, which is, you feel the history in a place, that studio was there. But the next day I was on the Jerry Lawler show, his talk show, where he covered like air shows.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Mid-South happenings, I got on and talked about Eric Embry. So, it was like, so he'd have wrestling interviews, and then he'd have, the Girl Scout cookie marathon or something, it was,
it was like the Memphis version of Joe Franklin.
No, it was better than that. It was better than Joe Franklin. Joe Franklin was, but anyhow, so let's talk about something that I get asked about constantly. The 500, the PWI.
The 500. Yes.
Now, in an interview in a magazine, when Stu retired, he claimed to have invented the 500, but that's half true. He came up with an idea for an article. Why don't we do the PWI 100, he said.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob the idiot said, 100, why don't we do 500? He goes, could you do 500? Sure, it doesn't sound so hard.
In a couple of days.
That's what I honestly thought I could. I had that much right here at that point. So I start doing this thing, and within the first day, it's did we work till 5 back then? I think we did. It's 5-ish. It's 5-ish, and I'm like, can I call in? Does anybody deliver food? And I'm thinking, I'm on B. There's A to C.
Right.
I'm on B. Oh God. So I just kept going and going and going. It's the famous story of Stanley going down Maple Avenue in Rockville Center at 2 a.m, coming home from some event. He sees the lights on. It was
lights on.
Police. That was me upstairs toiling away on the fifth floor.
On the first 500.
I am proud of the whole thing only in that from the get-go, the wrestlers took that thing damn serious.
Uh-huh.
They really did. I remember Chris Candido talking to me in Memphis going, hey, how come I went down 40 slots? What do you say? What do you say?
Yes, like the ratings. It's the ratings on super steroids, and they, everyone loved the ratings also.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, when you're ranking them like that, the ratings is just, it's 10, but this is industry wide.
At the beginning of each article, I said, just to make this list is an achievement. Because, you're up against Japan and Mexico and all these other things. And it was like, back then we didn't cover them as the way they do now. And now that Mexico and Japan is in every issue of PWI. But, it was daunting only because, if I had to do it today, it would have been so easy. But think of it. There was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
The only reference we had was our own notes.
Right.
Or what we've seen and heard, or what are back issues to thumb through to find weights and heights and all that stuff. There's no outlier. There's no encyclopedia to look up things. You had to have it right there in front of you. And
we tried to be the encyclopedia, and the 500 was amazing. And I remember, of course, there was always the debates of who's going to be number one, but also who's going to be number 500.
Right.
That was, in its own way, that was as hallowed a spot as the number one spot.
If I remember correctly,
if you're 498 and you don't make the 500 spot,
I remember who my 500s were. I remember who the 91 and 92. I remember who they were. I don't know. I don't remember which one was the year, but one of them was Zeus.
Wow. Okay.
And the other was Morgus the Maniac.
Morgus the Maniac, nice.
Yes, who was this? He kind of looked like Pamper or Fripple, but he was in scrubs. And he'd have I think his mom was his valet, who was a nurse, who used to inject him with things to calm him down. Some ridiculous. Oh God, I just don't remember. He was an East Coast indie guy, and I just thought it was the worst shtick I'd ever seen.
And there was no bowling ball gimmick on the 500 anywhere.
No, we're going to have to work on that. But anyway, no, I'm just proud to this day that it's still going, that the magazine's still going. It just makes me feel good that I have my fingernail in wrestling history just a little bit.
Well, I tried to look through some old magazines. The few that I have, I don't have a whole lot, to prepare for this discussion. And I do have, not in front of me, but I have the second PWI 500 that you did.
Right.
And your column, The Steel Cage, in that magazine was all about the women of wrestling and doing the top 100 for the women. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Which I don't think that ever happened, though, did it? It was always just the 500, or did they do the women 100 or the top 50 at one point?
Now I think they do a women's issue now. Now they do it.
You know what? The other thing that we did,
and they should do it,
and I forgot about this entirely until I looked at one of the anniversary magazines, and I'm holding in my hand, for those of you, the theater of the mind as you listen to this. This is the March 1989 issue of PWI, the 1988, the year in wrestling. And we did an index, the PWI index. So it was like you would see at the back of a very thick reference book, an index of every wrestler's name, every mention in every magazine that we did. So you could look through and go, oh, Jack Briscoe, he's mentioned in the September issue of Inside Wrestling and Blast from the Past, and in Matt Brock's Looking Back in the January issue of The Wrestler. It's like, holy crap, what a piece of reference to put together. And I see compiled by Gersh Kunzman, who probably hated us.
Kunzman. But you make a good point there. I'm glad you brought up Gersh. Because Gersh went on to be somewhat of a celebrity here in New York City.
Great guy.
In the news, and
yep,
I think he did some kind of playwriting and stuff like that. We had a lot of people.
Gersh did playwriting. You know who did playwriting was Gary Morgenstein.
Right. That I did know. Yeah.
Yes.
Also, we had Kostya Kennedy wrote wrestling articles.
Kostya Kennedy, yes.
And now
he's one of the Sports Illustrated.
Now he's one of the top sports writers in the world right now. I mean,
yep.
But if you thumb back to 1991, 92, I remember he wrote an article with the Road Warriors or something, and Stu was looking like, oh, God, what a lead. Whatever this lead was, I just remember going, wow, that's the lead. That's a perfect lead. I remember him saying, I'm going,
really?
You never said that to me, you son of a... But anyway... and
he complimented me one time about a line that I had in a story, but it was something that I swiped from one of Bruce Springsteen's lyrics, so I don't think that counts.
I don't think he ever complimented me, ever. Which is fine. Stu had his way about him, You know what? If he didn't say anything, that was a compliment. That's the way I looked at Stu.
So one of my favorite lines from Stu, he'd be sitting there reading wrestling stories all day long, story after story after story after story. And one day he says, if I was reading medical articles, I would have cured cancer by now.
Yeah. No, Stu was I was shocked when he retired, to be honest with you. That was last year or the year before? Recently he retired.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah.
Another guy built his life on pro wrestling. Good for him. Started out as a newsletter writer. He did his own wrestling newsletter in Long Island, and got the job at London Publishing and stayed there for, holy mackerel, a lot of years, almost 50 years.
Now, when I started at PWI, I don't remember my title, but was either associate editor or assistant editor at the beginning. You were managing editor, I believe, at that point.
I believe so, yeah.
Right.
And you moved into the managing editor slot.
Right.
Yeah, Stu became publisher.
Right.
When Peter King left. I moved up to editor-in-chief. You moved up to managing editor.
Oh, so that's how that worked. Okay, I thought that
it was like the Star Trek episode where the evil Spock would kill someone. Everyone moved up in rank.
Editor. Yeah, but I think the reason they made me managing editor was you were knee deep in WCW magazine at that point,
which was a great magazine, by the way. We had a lot of fun working on that one. I enjoyed WCW magazine a lot.
Sounded like a giant pain in the ass to me. I was there.
It was a giant pain in the ass getting approvals for everything, but
exactly, yeah.
I look back and actually did I pull it out? Yes. One of the single best magazines I think we ever produced, aside from the PWI year-end issues and PWI 500 issues, which were always tremendous. We did a collector's series special on Sting. and we had like you'd open up the front cover, it would fold out, and you'd open up the back cover, it would fold out, and you'd have a 4-page Sting poster in there. We
Right.
had Sting trading cards, so that was a big deal because it was a whole separate printing thing you had to do to get these perforated trading cards in the magazine. We had original comic from Marvel Comics all about Sting. It was, I think, one of the most professionally done single issues of any magazine we ever produced. But
WCW's
it was a
magazine.
gigantic pain in the ass.
It was. It was. It was.
Yeah,
I won't say
absolutely.
why because I don't want to slander anybody on their
No,
end, but it was their end that
no.
was the problem, to be honest with you. And even I was affected by that. I'd be writing. I remember handing in an article and it was laid out, and I think you came to me or somebody came to me and said, "We can't print that. They changed their mind. They're not doing this now.
Really?
You can't. You're going to have to change it." But, and I said what I said every day, but I have 75 other things to do. No, you got to rewrite this. And I'm like, oh, WCW.
Yeah, that's it. I guess it's like the pain of childbirth. You forget all about it a year later, and oh yeah, let's have another kid. So I forget a lot of that stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It was in the moment. There was a lot of frustration about it, no doubt.
I thought I know you were getting frustrated because the hassle of certain management types on their end was driving you ape shit, and I know it's true. I just you were pulling your hair out just trying to get workaday things done. Just come on, let's go. Let's make a decision, and you'd have to cross everything past like 4 or 5 different people. It had to be very tough on you.
Yeah, it was what it was. You just had to do it. I mean, it was a pain, but again, in terms of just looking back on it all, hey, they were full color slick paper magazines. It was fun to work in that environment, given that most everything else we did was pulp.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I worked for the second incarnation of WCW magazine. Did you know that?
I did not know this.
I was executive editor as bestowed by Colin Bowman, the British magazine publisher.
Oh boy, I haven't heard that name probably since then.
When he took over WCW, the first person he called was me.
Nice.
And I did 2 stints with that magazine. I remember quitting because I thought the product was bad. I had just seen a Hulk Hogan.
The ring product, you mean, not the magazine product?
No, the ring product. Yeah,
ring product.
I remember I was watching Kevin Sullivan and Arn Anderson versus Hulk Hogan and some other old man, and it was terrible. And I'm like, this is not going anywhere. No, I was so upset with the product. I said, let me step away. Colin was upset, but I came back. I had called him to see how he was doing about 3 months later, and he said, "You think you would like to try again?" And I went, "Okay." And of course, this is funny too. The first time I stepped away, 2 weeks later, Scott Hall got in the ring.
Well, okay.
Bad timing, Bob.
Yeah. Timing is everything.
Timing is everything. Because they went right from that. They went from all those fossils into the NWO format. They changed the whole thing in like 2 weeks. And the whole thing changed. And boom, jackpot.
Yeah.
So I came back eventually, and Colin's a great guy. I would like to get in touch with him. He treated me so well. But then they, for some reason, WCW decided they wanted to do the magazine themselves. Didn't last very long. Although they came up with some interesting concepts. Their version of it, they had a pop-up cover, a pop-up centerfold. Like you'd open it up and the action would just kind of spring out. You see the wrestlers kind of come out.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool, but I don't remember it didn't last so long. They couldn't keep a magazine going for whatever reason. Why did London lose it anyway?
I think it was because they wanted to do their own at some point.
But they didn't.
We had a contract with them, as I recall.
Right.
Maybe the contract ran out. It's who knows. But it lasted a couple, maybe 2-3 years. About 3 years, I think we did their magazine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We did poster magazines. I remember that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was. I don't know. They had a nice logo.
Yes, they did. People forget that London did the original WCW magazine. I
Yeah, it was,
think that's the
well,
great
yeah,
forgotten product that London did.
well, that's one of the things that I liked about that company was it was small, family owned, of course, Stanley Weston,
Right.
and if you sort of had an idea and had the energy, you could pretty much do anything you wanted. So I actually got involved in, and I think I had the title of marketing director in for a little while in the magazines, but I created a television campaign for PWI subscriptions, um, which was a great learning experience and just sort of fun to put all that together. We'd buy time for $5 a minute and throw it on there, and whatever came in, and it raised our subscriptions a little bit. Um, PWI hats and T-shirts and the Sky Flyers. I can't mention that branded name of frisbee.
No,
that
you can't. Oh my God, they're the most. In my
this
first newspaper job, I'm serious. Back the Catskill Daily Mail, right before I started with Tyson, I was in the news department. I mentioned the name Frisbee in a news article, and a week later, I get a letter from Whammo
really,
saying the trademark name Frisbee should only be used when describing Whammo's brand of blah blah blah. Blah. And I'm like, wow,
yeah, the lawyers
they
take that stuff
they
seriously.
were serious about the word Frisbee.
Yeah,
So
well,
I learned
we
never.
had our PWI Sky Flyer was
Right, Skyflyer or flying disc. Yes, right.
flying disc, right?
Every time I would never use that word again. I said I was scared straight. I was like, I can't believe how these people will find you. How did they find me in my little newspaper that had 7,500 circulation, whatever it was? How the heck did
Hmm.
they? I don't
But
know.
yeah, so special projects, special ideas for the magazine. When we did, people also forget that London did American Gladiators magazine
Roller
and
games.
Roller Games magazine, which was, oh, we could do a whole episode on roller games.
I actually liked working on roller games. And here's another tidbit. Colin Bowman did the second version of roller games, and I worked on that too.
Really,
Yes. Yeah.
roller games showed up. That the TV show showed up on one of the sports channels all the way down.
I
Like
saw it. I saw that
behind
recently. Yeah.
ESPN 12 or whatever. One of the FX sports channels, I
Right.
think.
Yeah.
And I caught up on a few of the episodes. It was interesting. It was
No,
fun.
that was that was TV hell. The second version of roller games. That's just noise and tumult, my friend. There's
Well,
just nothing to that.
they saw wrestling exploding in popularity and they wanted to sort of update roller derby the same way. And it I think it failed because you had two extreme factions fighting for control of the product. You
Right.
had one that wanted to be very traditional and one that wanted to be very extreme in the sh- in the over you just over the top characters and over the top
Right. That was the
sensibility.
Bill Griffiths faction,
Bill
right? Was the
Griffiths,
first one.
exactly. Yeah, well,
Right.
Bill Griffiths was the traditional,
Old school.
but
Right.
had they been able to meet in the middle and
It would
sort
have
of
worked.
figure
Yeah.
it out, it might have worked. Yeah, because there were some good ideas in there, and there were some pretty talented skaters too. But yeah,
Yeah.
roller games was fun.
Yeah.
Fun,
I enjoyed
fun again.
working.
Another fun one to work on. But
I enjoyed working on both versions of it, and the second one lasted even less time than the first one did. So
that's
it was. I really know how to pick them. But that was
so.
another Colin Bowman product. I think only an issue or two that actually came out.
So one thing I have to bring up that I thought about when we're going to talk about this in old school wrestling. I mentioned a few minutes ago. I haven't paid real close attention to wrestling over the years since I left the magazines. Now and again, I'll tune in. Channel flipping. I'll catch something here, something there. But one of the best things I caught was Impact Wrestling. Do you remember what they did? They called it Throwback Throwdown.
Beats me.
Oh, my friend, you need to go back and find these online. So Impact, I think they did two or three of them. Throwback Throwdown. And anybody hearing this will know exactly what I'm talking about if they saw it. They they took their present day wrestlers and they couched them. It was like it was like Atlanta TV taping in the studio. You had the
Right.
ring with the studio audience. All the characters came in. They were like mid 80s style characters. It was a loving recreation of that whole early mid 80s TV wrestling vibe. With the angles, with the characters, with the interviews, even with the signage, with the T-shirts. Like they went somewhere and they created like these really crappy T-shirts with iron-on letters that
Right.
people would wear back in the day, and they down to every detail. The Impact Wrestling Throwback Throwdown, I would watch that all day long. If you
I
love
was,
the old school stuff, you gotta
well,
look those things up.
did you see Billy Corgan's revival of the NWA when it first started?
I
Recently, like
didn't.
2020,
No, I did not.
2019. You know
Did
what?
they
They
do
had
the
a whole flavor.
same sort of thing?
Yeah, it felt like you were in, it was 605. The
Wow.
whole studio it was in Atlanta, and it was like, it was a studio wrestling show, and it had the flavor. Jim
Yep.
Cornette was doing color at one point.
Oh, that's great. No, I hadn't
But
seen that one.
it eroded so fast. I mean, it's still going, but they had a bunch of great wrestlers in the beginning, and they're all gone. Like Nick Aldis was their champion, and they had James Storm and Trevor Murdoch and on and on. Great, they had all
Uh-huh.
kinds of Taryn Terrell. It's just a great array of talent. But one boy that whittled away. Now their champion is Tyrus, who used to be one of the Funkadelics in WWF. What was it?
The Funkadelics. Okay.
I forget his previous name because I just don't care. But anyway, it's they lost the flavor somehow already, and they announced it as wrestling like it used to be, wrestling like it should be. But
Right.
it already feels like they're copying the big boys, and that's the last thing we need is more copying. They should have stayed a little more truer to the classic feel.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you, I stumbled across this Impact episode. I texted Bill after while I was watching it. I was like, "You got to turn on whatever channel it was and watch this because this is old. This is what we lived for years. They nailed it. They just nailed the flavor of it in so many ways. So much fun.
Yeah, I can't tell you how I miss the Emmy Yates tape days, man. I mean, I really do. I poured over every one of those shows, and I never considered that I was wasting a moment. I just really enjoyed, and of all the writers you've had there, I was like the indie guy. I would prefer to write about Memphis and
Mhm.
Continental and Savoldi and all these
Well, that's why
others.
you did the 500 because you knew all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that is why.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
wise because I kept an eye on the stuff that we would never put on the cover. Oh, when I went to Memphis, I remember talking to Jerry Jarrett. He's going, he was telling me, we're up against everybody here. He said, we rely on your magazines to get the word out about us.
hmm
And I went, yeah, I understand that. That's why I'm here. But by the same token, I couldn't say here, I'm going to put Lawler on the next cover. I just couldn't say that because back this was 91, our covers were Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, Ultimate Warrior. That's what
Right.
was
Yeah.
going on at that
That's
point.
what sold.
What are we going to do? I mean, we would give them a postage stamp size side photo, but we couldn't make it the main image. We're going to put Billy Travis on the cover. I mean, it's just, I'm not putting down Billy Travis. I'm just saying it's like we had to sell magazines, and it was getting harder by the day, even then,
Yeah.
to figure out, we needed, Hulk Hogan's head on a stick. It was
That's
important.
one of the greatest covers ever. But yeah.
Oh. Well,
Oh, yeah.
let me cut you off.
Please.
The greatest cover from my tenure, and I think you were the person behind this, was the Midnight Express versus Midnight Express Inside Wrestling cover. I believe you were
The two of
the
them,
architect
two
of
teams
Bill
squaring
taking the
off.
photo. Yes, the Justice League versus Justice Society cover.
Right. Yeah,
That was you.
maybe. Yeah, that actually is very reminiscent of a Marvel Avengers annual
Right, right,
cover.
right,
That
right.
because
Well, yeah,
I used to take.
you showed me the cover. Yeah,
Well, I mean, everybody does, right? I would shamelessly swipe from
yeah,
anywhere I could,
yeah.
because we had tons of product we had to produce.
No, I'm
So
telling you,
that's very possible. Okay,
you were the architect of that. Was my
yeah,
favorite
that
cover.
sounds right.
No,
Well,
you were. You
do
were.
you remember where the sort of cornerstone of the PWI year-end issue, in addition to the achievement awards, was the year in review section, where you'd
Right.
have 5 or 6 blurbs on each page with the snarky headline and whatever it was.
Yeah.
Do you recall where that was stolen from?
No.
That actually is the wrestling version of Esquire magazine's Dubious Achievement Awards.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I was a
was
huge magazine. I bought every magazine on the. I just love magazines.
I remember the section
We
inside of
swiped that.
Wasn't the world just ready for ...
Yeah, right.
And
And we carried them over
writing that
from
a
year
couple
to
times.
year.
I
Yeah.
regret some of the things I wrote. One of them was what ... Eric Bischoff of the AWA ? Question mark. I miss Larry Nelson, for God's sake, and I'm saying, who needs this smoothie on the AWA? It got worse, But no, I wasn't very foresightful then, but
But yes.
But yeah,
Wow.
there was
Midnights. Interesting. Okay.
that was definitely your concept. I remember that. I remember you talking about and showing me a picture of the comic book or something.
Right.
I'm going to put the Midnights on this side and put Cornette against Dangerously, and the other two on the other. And that was a classic cover. And I was so proud to see one of the Vice TV specials. It was Jim Cornette at home. And he has that framed in his house.
Really?
Yes. And I was I felt a sense of pride. I said, because I was there when that was shot. After shot it, and I was with him.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, that's great.
Wow.
The fact that somebody like Jim Cornette thought of enough of that cover to put it in his house. Did you even know that?
I did not know that. I'd love to hear Cornette. You could hear Cornette all day long on his own podcast and stuff.
Right,
but I would love to hear him talk about the magazine specifically because, like Paul Heyman, he sold photos to the magazines early on, and he had a great relationship with the magazines through the years. So I'd love at some point to hear, from some of the wrestlers themselves back in those days, what it was like from their side. Like, you and I and Apter and Stu and whoever else could talk about, how we felt about what we did in the magazines, but I don't hear a lot about
how the wrestlers felt.
Some of those guys really felt while it was going on.
One guy gave me feedback. It was Mick Foley. Said,
I went to his wedding, by the way. Did you know that?
I was invited too. I couldn't go. You know why? My brother got married same day.
My sister and I went to the church. Yeah,
you actually went. Oh, good for you.
We're at Mick's wedding. This is pretty awesome.
But anyway, Mick told me that I wrote in his voice as good as his voice was. He says, "You perfectly get me down." He says, "You understand." That's a
real compliment. Yes.
And I'm also proud of having to fight Stu again and go, we got to cover Cactus Jack.
Right.
Because I was coming back from high school cards and going, this guy's something else.
Mm-hmm.
You got to trust me on this. He's something else. Yeah, but he hasn't got any muscles. No, I'm telling you, he's something else. But he worked at he was at Lindbergh High School. I'm telling you, he's something else. I had to beat that into Stu. And finally, one of the magazines, Cactus reminds me this day, or Cactus, Mick Foley, it said Cactus Jack Attack on top of it. He says, you put me on a cover. I said, yeah, man, you deserve it.
Right.
And those are the moments that made my head spin. I just, thinking back on, I'm proud of being, coming back to your office, seeing Rob Van Dam, Rob Stikowski, and going, we got to cover this guy. We got to cover this guy. There's been a bunch of them that I helped get word about before any other people getting publicity we did. And I'm proud of that.
One of the things that you talked about in episode 4, and we mentioned a little bit earlier, the whole thing of wrestling psychology, that some of your favorite moments in the business were talking wrestling psychology.
Yes.
With some of the guys in the business.
Oh, hell yeah. I did.
Do you have a couple of specific examples you can share there?
Oh, God. Well, first of all, and I always say this, and this is based on other people that I've known that were wrestling journalists or worked around wrestling. They seem to care more about chumming up to whoever. Well, I took a car ride with, Tony Altamore or whatever. Right. With me, I didn't care. I was there. I really wanted to learn the business and the psychology. Right. That's what fascinated me. I always picture myself maybe someday being a booker or something like that. I really wanted to. In fact, I was told by early ECW guys, Eastern, I was considered. They wanted to see if I could come up with, because they didn't like what they were doing early on. They said, let Bob try it. But Todd never followed up on
You know,
that.
not to cut you off, please come back to your story, but that you said that reminds me, it always, I always found it curious that none of the promotions ever really came to the magazines for staff when it came to bookers or writers or anything
Yeah,
like that. I mean,
yeah,
we spent years around the business, and I think there was some outreach to Bill Apter here and there occasionally,
sure.
but no one ever looked at any of the writers that moved through the magazines and said, "Hey, these guys get the business. They understand what's going on. We should bring them along and add them to our writing staff." That never really happened, other than the example that you just mentioned, that you were considered, but no
Nothing came of it.
serious outreach really came of
No,
it.
nothing came
That
of
always
it.
kind of surprised me. It felt like a real untapped resource for the promotions. But
Well, I
anyway,
just,
move along.
but you know what? I think we did a masterful job of taking their angles and blowing them up. And really like expanding them without crossing the line into complete ridiculousness.
Right.
I think we would take a little something that was going on or somebody's personality and just amplify it, turn it up to 11.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I think we did a great job with that stuff. I thought it was entertaining, and this is coming from a guy, and I said this on a previous podcast. I know I got the job with London, but I used to like the Kaiser magazines when I was a kid. They were my favorite.
Shh.
I know. No. I can say it. I can say it now.
You
Who
can say
cares
that.
now? No, I like the Kaiser books because they had the results in the back. They had like 20 pages of agate results.
Right.
And you know me, I'm an old news guy. You remember me at lunch? Did I ever not read the sports agate at
Yeah.
lunch?
Well, that's
Right?
the PWI Arena Reports and PWI Weekly.
That's right.
So, but anyway, get back to your wrestling psychology story.
No, like I was saying, I actually got to sit down with people like Soley.
Right.
Soley was in a lounge, and I said the magic word. He goes, we were talking about something. Said, God, they wouldn't have done that way 5 years ago. And he went, and his eyes lit up. He said, "You're damn right, they wouldn't have." And we just started going on about how we don't know why they're doing this. We don't know why they're doing that. It was better then. This was the psychology, and that was a great conversation. One time, I'm in Philadelphia after one of Joel Goodhart's shows, I think. Buddy Rogers is sitting there having a sandwich. He's having dinner after the show. And I had seen him backstage, I was taking pictures then. I even took a picture of him doing the famous pose at age 70 or whatever it was. I did a new picture of the old pose that he used to do. He said, "What do you sit down?" I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah, get you something to eat. Sit down." So I talked wrestling psychology with Buddy Rogers for like an hour and a half. And then there was another time when I was lucky enough when I went to Memphis. There was a back room there. There was at the Pipkin building. And Eric Embry is just he was the booker at that point.
Okay.
And he said, "How'd we do?" And then it was the same thing. We were talking about the difference between WWF and what they do and what they can't do and what they have to do and the struggle to keep people coming in and all that stuff. It's just the nuts and bolts stuff.
Right.
Wrestling psychology. How do we get these people to buy a ticket? How do we get these people to buy a ticket? How do we get them to buy another ticket once they bought their first ticket?
Exactly.
That's the stuff that fascinated me.
Yep. And we talked about it to tie it back to the magazines. We would talk about that. I remember hearing and saying many times, you're not working on this magazine. You're working on the next magazine. Because if this issue is good, they're going to come back for the next one.
Right.
So you're really working on two issues at the same time. But like I saw that popping the hood and getting under the, getting into the nuts and bolts of how it all works and why and what works and what doesn't work. That's all. That's part of that that's the dance we talked about earlier. The line between what the fans know, what they don't know. They know that there's the line. They can't nail it down. That's where the fascination comes in.
Right. And once in a while we would do real stuff. I remember Dave Rosenbaum writing about the Bruiser Brody.
The Bruiser Brody, yes.
And
David Schultz. The John Stossel thing. Yep.
One of the hardest things for me to do, the hardest assignments I ever had to do when I was there was Nikita Koloff's wife was dying. I don't know if it was wife or girlfriend, forgive me. My memory's just not what it used to be, but I interviewed her from her hospital bed.
Oh my goodness.
and it was tough to do.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And it was all real with a capital R. And I didn't want to exploit it. That's the
Right.
thing. Our writing is naturally exploitive in and of itself. The way we wrote and our subheads and everything else was, designed to lure you in. This was an assignment that I found particularly hard. But Nick,
Yeah.
Nick was fabulous talking about it. She was awesome talking about it, and I learned to love them both. I found love with both of them.
Yeah,
And,
it's a tough balance because you have to write about it in a genuine way, but also in a way where it does fit into the context of the magazine as a whole. And that's
I had to start.
a
I had to
difficult
start it
line
with,
to tread.
and I had to start it with a kayfabe. First couple of graphs, like he's waving goodbye to Ivan Koloff, and he's leaving, and
Right.
just to keep it in the wrestling, and then the rest of it, 90% of it was totally factual, and it was very hard to do because I didn't want to go too far. I didn't want to make it tear jerking, and
Right.
she was so positive. It was just a very, very hard thing. I'm always grateful to both him and her for the cooperation, and it was one of my best moments. I thought there. I thought it was a really good. I think nobody else had this. Nobody else would even think of covering it in a wrestling magazine, and we did.
Yeah.
But we did other things like that too. I remember
all the Von Erich stuff, of course.
Yeah, I remember a few of my columns though. I talked about a Memphis wrestler. I can't remember his name right now, but he was in bad shape. I wrote a whole column about his illness and how they were running, fund drive for him.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing back saying, yeah, we raised XX amount because people saw it in the magazine. That made me feel good. It was real.
Right.
Sometimes you had to be 100% factual, and boom, just you can't fart around with stuff that involves people's lives. You just can't.
Yep.
And the fact that, my news training, I just went back to my old straight-laced news training before I switched it back to the other way.
Right. And we could do that because, yeah, it's what you said earlier. We weren't wrestling fans putting out magazines. We were magazine professionals. Most of us came out of college journalism programs or
that's the difference. When I started
be.
there, I was not a magazine professional. I was a newspaper guy.
Well, yeah, that's
I never wrote
magazine or newspapers. Yeah, but
I never wrote for a magazine
sort
before PWI.
Yeah, but as a shared sensibility in that, hey, let's put out a magazine. It wasn't that. I mean, there was a level of professionalism again, whether it was newspapers or magazines.
All of us were. Let's get it right. I remember one time I made a big faux pas. It was an article about Hulk Hogan visiting military bases, and brushed Bob put down Marines when it was the Army.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Biggest error I ever made while I was there. And, oh God, I felt suicidal. I did. I felt miserable.
Yeah.
I couldn't have felt worse.
Those are the ones that just, you just want to take it back and do it all over again.
How did I do this? But it's, I will say that stuff like that happens when you're writing 17 articles in 3 days. I mean, it's just, no, and I'm not even being, am I being hyperbolic? I am not.
Not at all. My personal best, well, because there were articles and columns and little short pieces and so forth. But when you get to the full length stories, which were about 1,000 words a pop, my personal best was 6 in one day. I'll never forget that. Just
oh no,
give me another piece of paper, cranking them out. That was in the typewriter days.
When they made me managing editor, not only was I now given the task of doing the ad polls and working with Andy Rodriguez and Chris Bernucca at that point, and Dave was not there for some reason. I forget if David left us by that point, or he was freelancing, or he just wasn't in the office, but he wasn't there.
Okay.
So I think that's why Bernucca came in, because Dave was not there. So I had all that new stuff to do, plus all my old stuff to do. And then nobody said, don't do the old stuff. You got to do this new stuff in addition to the old stuff. And, oh, God, I got to tell you, sometimes it got, I was a blithering mess sometimes. I probably, my personality changed. And if it did, I apologize for the past. I know I was grouchy for a while because it was getting to me. It was, at the point where they were putting out all this new product and the
Right.
weekly and my new position and this and that, I was starting to feel the pressure a little bit, and I wanted to be good, but by the same token, one man can only do so much.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it got really, really, really stressful. It did.
I don't. It could get stressful. I mean, we had a lot of product to put out. There's always concern about sales and everything. But I don't. And again, this could just be selective memory, fading memory. But I really don't remember the mood of the office being um, combative or negative in any way. It's like, oh, this, just
No, you know what?
argumentative or anything like that. It was
No.
everybody kind of supported each other, and if someone was going through a bad time, you'd help them out
I
as
remember
much as
at one
possible.
point I had a little bit of, it wasn't a row. It was a good natured, not an argument, but you were editing one of my pieces. What Bob says, if you think you know what you're talking about, you've got another thing coming. No, not thing, it's thing. Because it's got to be think followed by think. And I went, come on, people don't talk that way. No, Bob, listen to me. You've got to, and you were adamant about this. It's got to be think.
Well, yeah, that's like the Oxford comma thing. We argue about it. Yeah.
So if it's not think, it's got to be think. I'm like, this is a wrestling magazine. No, it's got to. You kept on, and I said, all right, I'm changing it.
Remember, Dave Rosenbaum reminded me recently. I think it was Dave reminded me recently of one where, and to this day, it's just sort of one of my pet peeves where people like the phrase "the late." Like you would never say the late George Washington.
Oh,
right?
But you know what? Standards have gone downhill since then. Holy mackerel! I see it in newspapers now.
Oh well, there's no standards anymore. But
No.
My line about that was, look, at some point they're not late. They're just not showing up. Drop it. Don't say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no standards then. I mean, I think on our worst day, our editorial standards were better than the average newspaper or website today.
Oh, I agree with that.
Standards have gone straight down the toilet.
I work for some great editors, you guys included. That's the one thing that kept me in publishing until 2 years ago. I work with some good editors who really beat me good standards into me, and then once you get those standards in your head, it becomes easy after that, and then you can impart that stuff to other people, which kept me going for years and years and years. So
Stu introduced me to the work of Rudolf Flesch. Flesch, who wrote books like The Art of Readable Writing, The Art of Clear Thinking. They were written back in the 40s, if I'm not mistaken, the late 40s, and valid to this day. I still have copies of them on my bookshelf. Go back to them every once in a while, skim through them. Just, the basics, right? It's basics of communication in any field, whether it's...
I got real anal. I remember applying for a copy editor job and losing it because I was too accurate. To wit, Jake the Snake Roberts will be bringing his snake to Nassau Coliseum. Crossed it out. No. Jake Roberts will bring his snake to Nassau Coliseum. You get to the point. He's not will be bringing, he's bringing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh no, they argued with me. They didn't like that. So I didn't get the job, and I said, "Good." No, but I'll tell you something. Here's something just between you and me and the wall. It has nothing to do with anything. I will not learn SEO writing. I'd rather quit. I'm not doing it. SEO writing is evil.
Yeah, well,
so is AI.
Well, ChatGPT is going to dump so much lousy SEO content onto the internet.
Yep.
5 years from now, I've thought a lot about this with ChatGPT, and I've played with it. And I do a little bit of writing for a website now about rock music and that sort of thing. And I've played with ChatGPT. I think it's going to be quite some time before it replaces writers. I do think it will become a valid tool for writers. So in the sense of, a sculptor with clay, you need a lump of clay to start with. all right, well, ChatGPT can generate that lump of clay for you. So it will give you a starting point that's further than the blank page, but you're still going to need the writer to turn it into something. And
Yeah.
if you play with these things, and if you really read, have it generate a dozen articles and read them. They all have the same. I can't even say the same tone of voice. It's the same lack of tone of voice.
Right. Yeah.
There's sort of this uniform blandness and complete lack of personality.
Yeah.
Which again will be great for SEO. There's going to be people
Yeah.
that are
They'll
going to
have the keywords,
that are going
right? Yeah.
yeah, they're going
Yeah.
to churn that crap out all day long. But I think it's going to cause writers to up up our game a little bit, and be better at what we do, which is not a bad thing.
Right.
And be
If
better
anybody
editors.
values it. You see, that's the thing that's got
Well,
me bothered.
that's always the
You see,
yeah.
that's what has me bothered. If this becomes commonplace, it'll become the standard, and the old standard will be like a headlock into an abdominal stretch. Nobody's going to do it anymore.
Right. Well, it's yeah. Well, listen, what are the standards for facts and truth anymore? You know,
Oh hell yeah! I
facts
hear you.
versus alternative. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's
Um,
another topic. Yeah.
but yeah, I'm glad I'm on the tail end of my career
Damn
in a
skippy,
lot of
man.
ways.
Yes, I'm with you. Listen,
I
I
really
love
am. I would
writing.
not want to be coming up, and I would not want to be have a career in writing and be coming up right now.
You know what I
It's
discovered?
not a good scene.
I think I can thank London for this. London Publishing is that I think I enjoyed learning to edit well more than writing, because most of my work in the last 15, 18 years has been more editing than writing.
Right.
I like the nuts and bolts. I like the day to day of putting out a publication. Just the general work. I want to do the nuts and bolts, the workaday stuff, the boring shit. That's
Right.
what I like. I've always enjoyed turning garbage into a ham salad sandwich. I want to make good out of bad, and I got really good at that. Particularly working for the last job that I worked for, which I will go nameless. But I just I like editing. Editing is fun.
Yeah. And
But now if
who's
that
the well,
standard
there's a
changes,
famous writer that said, the writing is really editing.
it is.
There's it's you could write the thing, but you have to look at it and edit it again and edit it yet again and again and again and again and get it to the point where it needs to be. It's not just the writing of it. So we shall see.
Let's veer off.
Okay.
I think so many people know you from a moment you had. The Jimmy Snuka steel cage photo.
I wish I had royalties on that shot.
No kidding.
Holy mackerel.
I mean, I think more people remember you for that than any other factor. Am I wrong or am I close?
You're close. That's probably true. That the TV stuff I did with Bill Apter.
Yeah.
That snooker shot was pure luck. I mean, I had a 1 in 4 shot at being at the right place in the garden, depending which corner he was going to jump off. And oh man, it was just. And when he hit Backlund, holy mackerel!
Now,
What a sound!
Where were you to get that amazing vantage point?
I was just in the stands with a camera with a telephoto lens on it. Yeah.
I mean, that is the photo of that moment.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great shot if I do say so.
No, it is.
I wish I had, like I said, I wish I had royalties on it. But yeah, that was, I've talked about this before, and photographing wrestling it's not that difficult. I did a lot of photography of wrestling. I did a bunch of photography of boxing, which is very difficult to photograph.
Yes, it is. Way harder. Yes, boxing is tough.
Man,
I tried to shoot Mike Tyson once. Impossible.
But my favorite moments with wrestling photography were sort of assisting Bill Apter when he had wrestlers in a studio situation. Because Bill, being Bill, with his larger than Bill personality, or maybe just exactly the Bill personality,
right,
he was able to get wrestlers relaxed, and by being relaxed, he could talk them into doing poses and situations that maybe they wouldn't otherwise do for someone else. So if it was Roddy Piper in a hotel dressing room that we tore apart and stuck a backdrop up on the wall, and Bill turning into Jerry Lewis to get Roddy relaxed and laughing, and Bill would grab the shot. And boy, there's a great photo of Roddy Piper being natural and laughing. That's a hard one to get, but Bill was able to get it.
Yeah.
Seeing him interact with wrestlers that way was really a lesson in how to get great photography out of someone.
Once they're loose, it's going to be a good shoot.
Exactly.
No
exactly.
No question about it.
And it's hard to get them loose, but boy, Bill was able to do it.
Sitting here talking with you about the old days a thought just crossed my mind. This is why my podcast is never going to be top 20. And not because
not if you have schmucks like me on.
No. That's not what I'm saying.
That ain't helping any.
No,
that's not helping at all.
No. Here's why. I think people tune into these podcasts. It's like Bob Smith shoots on PWI next time. No. I enjoyed my time there. I have no grudges against anyone. I consider you all my friends to this day. That don't sell.
Right.
It doesn't. I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about anybody. I mean, everybody has a hard time. Sometimes you do. Let's face it, any job, maybe you're not happy with the money you make, or you're not happy with workload or so. But that's every job. I mean, every job you ever have is going to have its ups and downs. I just found it
I hated Rich Countess in the boxing department because he used to spit in the garbage can.
There it is. There's the shoot, folks.
There it is. That's it. I'm gonna shoot right now.
There
Rich
it is.
Countess. We would get into fights. He would just sit at his desk and he'd turn it, spit in the garbage can, which I thought was the most disgusting thing imaginable. And I think one day I just emptied the whole garbage can on his desk and just stop doing that. That's fine. That's the worst thing I could say about The Office, I suppose.
There you go. If that's the worst thing, it's pretty good. But no, all my memories are good. The worst day I had there was the day Stanley walked in and went, "I'm selling the company."
Yeah.
I had bought property within walking distance. I thought my life was pretty sad. I thought I was ensconced. I thought I was doing a decent job there. And then Stanley walked in. You don't know how bad that hurt.
Yeah, I'll bet it did.
Again, I was I was still a youngish guy at that point. I couldn't move, and there was no internet. I couldn't file stories with my phone. I couldn't. There was no cell phones. If you folks can imagine this, you young kids listening.
Yeah.
I was either go to Pennsylvania, which I had no interest in doing, and couldn't financially do, even if I wanted to. I couldn't sell my co-op apartment I bought 2 years earlier. How was I going to do that? Nobody at Cap was offering me moving expenses. Right? I don't know if you got them, but
no,
nobody talked about anything like that to me. So I just had to go, and I took the first job I could get, the magazines I could get.
Yeah, I didn't want to go at first. It was I sent resumes everywhere when that news came down, and it was tough. I mean, the job market was tough. There'd be publishing companies in New York City that had openings, but they were paying lousy salaries, and they wanted experience that was triple what I had at the time, and they wanted to, give me twice your experience and for half the salary. That's what was out there at the time, and I just had nowhere else to turn. So all right, well, guess we're going to Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I don't mean to be a downer, but it really pinched. It really did. I didn't want the job I got, I went to, but to be honest with you, I ran out of that company. I got out of it as quick as I could. I just needed to go. I needed to at least set myself up to be able to stay where I was, because I had no option. But I am thankful for the freelance jobs that came my way afterwards with Sandy Krebs, the main event, and Colin Bowman at WCW. And Apter called me, and I did some work for WOW. And then some years passed, and a year, 15 months ago, whatever it was, Rizzy calls me and says, "Would you like to be in a podcast?" So I have determined that this wrestling thing ain't going to let me go. If anybody sees me online and goes, "Bob, do you remember?" I get tweets and Facebook things all the time. "You remember this article that you wrote?" And I go, "No." Yeah, right. Do you ever get that? You remember the
I do.
article
No, I
about the
do. I
Midnight
do
Express
get that. Yeah.
1982? No, I don't remember any of it. And now, but once they show it to me, I remember it intimately.
Right.
That's something I'm discovering. No, I don't remember the article. I just was interviewed by Brian Solomon.
Brett Solomon. Yeah.
He says, I loved your piece in the Steel Cage in 1991 about the return of the Sheik. I went, thanks. And in my mind, I'm going, I don't remember that. And I didn't.
Well, yeah. Like I mentioned the Twitter account earlier, Wrestle Magazine, and that account will tweet out stories from the London mags of the 80s and early 90s, and sometimes my byline is on them, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Let me read that again. Other times there's no byline, and I'll zoom in on it and read it again, and I'll know from reading it who wrote it.
Yeah.
Like I'll know, oh, that was Dan wrote that one, or Dave Rosenbaum clearly wrote that one. That's obvious, or oh, that's a Gersh thing.
Right. I there's another one, Wrestler Weekly on Twitter. They post our covers all the time with autographs on them. They post our ratings, which I love, of all the London mag, not just PWI,
right.
but it could be from like Sports Review Wrestling, July 91, it just, and I love it. I love those guys. They're keeping our spirit alive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fans out there that still do. And I appreciate them so much. I really do.
And again, I think one of the great things when I think back, like I started in 81, and those first couple of years really just had the most unique, like, okay, I'm looking at a copy of Sports View Wrestling from 1981 right now.
Okay.
And even just like the thing, there was a column in it called "We Accuse," had a big finger pointing out at the reader. We accuse,
right, yeah,
and like the standard thing, because you have to explain what the column's about to a new reader, right? From time to time, the editors of this magazine find it necessary to condemn those in wrestling who would subvert the basic principles of decency, integrity, and honesty. Without such truths, our sport will die. That's great.
Yeah, it's great.
That's just a great, lay it out there. Oh, well, I got to read that column. Holy mackerel! I don't want our sport to die.
There's a news writer I know named Bob Dial in the Albany, New York area. I love the guy to death, and we've remained close, or friends all these years. I worked with him at the first newspaper I had, and when I got the wrestling magazine job, he started to buy the magazine. He said, "I love Matt Brack because he quote reports everything he sees without fear or favor." That's without awesome. Fear or favor. So there was something. How do I put this? There was something. Literal. There was something learned about the writing. Whoever wrote those intros was a genius. Who wrote those things?
Before my time, they were
because they remained static. Like every column would have the same, subhead.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to know who wrote Matt Brock's, because that one's killer.
Without fear or favor.
Without reporting everything he sees, without fear or favor. Oh. Perry White.
That sounds like it could be a Dan Shockett. He might have written that one.
That sounds like
that sounds like something would have come out of his typewriter.
Yeah.
Oh man.
You know who had a way? I hate to say this. I know that Steve Farhood wrote some wrestling stories, and Steve had a way, boy. Steve would really go all out to turn a phrase.
Yes. And I don't think I've talked about this before. Maybe I have, but when I was hired, the idea was the wrestling editors were supposed to contribute to the boxing magazines and vice versa. Everybody was supposed to do everything. So it didn't come along till a little bit later that wrestling editors are working on wrestling magazines, and that's it. And the boxing department stays in the boxing department. It was intended to be crossover. So Steve Farhood had a column in the wrestling magazines, and he had fun doing it. I don't think he hated doing it, but it took him away from the stuff that he really wanted to do, which was KO magazine, and he was great at that. But I remember there was one point where, and I have a photocopy of this column in my file somewhere. He had to do a column on a new wrestler, Izzy Slapowitz. Do you remember this? Did you ever see the famous Izzy Slapowitz column?
Yes, that's iconic. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
And he just wrote a column about Izzy that Stu read it and goes, "We can't publish this. You're not
Right,
writing
right.
wrestling anymore." That's it. I get the message.
Yeah. Steve Farhood had the most incredible, hilarious, dry sense of humor ever. When I first
Oh,
met
he's
him,
great.
when I
Great
first
guy.
met the guy, as you remember, our desks were facing each other. And I will say I never had a bad word with him. He's a great guy. It was
Yes.
wonderful sitting next to him for all those years. And early on there, I'm talking to him, but I don't know how the Sheik came up. He's going, well, I'm Lebanese. He goes, I consider the Sheik the greatest Lebanese hair of all time, of course, other than Uncle Tanous. And I'm like, wow. But he
We all
said it
had a
with that,
great Uncle Tanu spit take in our
right,
repertoire.
right. But he said it in that dry, Steve Landesberg, like, just
Right.
blurted out, and I'm on the floor. And I'm like, you're not. And then I just start laughing. I hardly knew him at the. Oh, you're not. I was like, you're not. And then I would just laugh because I was like, I realized I was being ribbed.
But
Steve's awesome, and he's does a great job in boxing too to this day. Just awesome.
The best way I can describe that office, what it was like back then, was the documentary Caesar's Writers about the Sid Caesar show.
Right.
When you had people like Mel Brooks and Woody Allen and people that went on to television writing and production superstardom, and they were just all in this room, and you could just imagine what the people bouncing ideas off of each other and wisecracking each other and all the rest of it. And that's what it felt like. It was so much fun to go to work because you're knocking at the story, and then out of left field comes this Uncle Tanous comment, and you're you're just losing it for 20 minutes, and then 40 years later it's sticking in your head, and that says something.
I remember when I got the job at PWI, and I think Stu called me to verify that I had been hired. And I put the phone down and I looked at my wife and I said, this is a miracle. And I wanted that job so bad. I had a truck at that point, if you remember, that had commercial plates on it. So I had to take the not the Long Island Railroad, the Metro North Railroad from Pelham into Manhattan, and then jump on another train and take that into Rockville Center every day. And I did that for the better part of a year. Never complained about it once because I wanted that job. Not everybody could get a job like that.
Right.
Remember, I did that for a while until I finally got new plates and I was able to drive the parkways and whatnot. And it was just, I just, to this day, I don't know how to put into words what that felt like. Just to get hired. Mm-hmm. Just to get hired. I was the guy, even as an adult, when I worked for my first newspaper, happened upon a bookstore that was about a half a mile from where our newspaper office was. And I swear to God, this is true. I look outside the bookstore, this dilapidated old wooden rickety bookstore. And outside there's a folding table with about 700 wrestling magazines on it.
Holy mackerel.
I'm an adult. This is about 3 years before I got hired by you guys.
Right.
So I'm looking, I go, Nirvana, right? And there's a mailbox with a note on it. It says, if you want these magazines, take as many as you want, leave $1 in the mailbox.
Wow.
So I took $1 out, and as a full-grown adult, here I am driving back to Saugerties with boxes of wrestling magazines. My wife goes, are you nuts? I went, yeah.
Yeah.
This is before the PWI and all this other stuff. Read every one of those magazines. It wasn't just our stuff. It was Wrestling World and, Wrestling Eye and
Wrestling Review.
I don't know who left these things. Wrestling Review, yes, the Kaiser books. And I still read them as an adult is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So to get a job with the people that, the type of magazine I enjoyed and would invariably pick up no matter where I was, it felt miraculous. I still don't know how I did it. I'm glad I did it. You don't know how I treasure and cherish the time I had there. It's unlike any job I've had before or since. The people were all memorable, and all of them in different ways. Even the front office staff,
Yeah.
Stanley, good gosh, Stanley, the old pirate,
That was one of my real regrets of my time there is I always kind of steered clear of Stanley.
Me too. Me too.
And I wish I had been able to spend time just, have a couple drinks with Stanley and hear stories about the old days of publishing, because I'll bet he had a million of them. He must have had some great stories.
Well, I had two
of
moments.
him coming up, and yeah.
I had two moments with Stanley. The first one was when I decided to buy that apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And Stu goes, Stanley wants to see you. I went, oh, jeez. What did I do?
What's this about?
What's this about?
Called into the principal's office.
And I go, and he goes, sit down. I'm doing my best Stanley Weston impersonation.
Sit down, Smith.
I understand you're buying property here at Rockville Center. I just want to congratulate you. And I want you to open that drawer over there. So I opened the drawer, and there was a big bottle of expensive wine and an envelope. Gave me a little money to help. He said, we wish you all the best, and we love you, he said. I said,
oh, very nice.
What is he? He said, we love you. And then the PWI 500 came out. And Stu says, Stanley wants to see you in his office. Oh, jeez. Same spiel. He gave me a bonus. He never gave anybody a bonus.
Right.
And he goes, we love you. We're glad you're here. Wow. This is great. But then he got me later on. When one time, I don't even remember this, I was buying health insurance.
Okay.
And a woman came up to give me the cuff and take my temperature and do all the stuff they do when you buy health insurance.
Yeah.
Well, the only place I could think of to sit down with her, I couldn't do it in our offices, so it was in Stanley's area.
Mm-hmm.
So he walks in on us, gives me the look, walks out. We finish up. I go back. Later on, I see Stanley Hall. He goes, Bob, the next time you want to bring your girlfriend in the office, let me know. I mean, this was this old lady, just,
right.
And I was like, oh. So Stanley could be, he could be hilarious. He was very fun.
I had one time where I went out on summer vacation, and I had much more hair back then than I have now. And I decided on my summer vacation that I wanted to get, because I had sort of brownish hair, and I wanted to get some sort of highlights in my hair. So there's this product called Sun In that you spray in your hair and comb it through, and it brightens up your hair. Well, I used a little too much Sun In on the summer vacation, and I looked like Flair. I went like full blonde with the hair. And so I come back to work, and I pass Stanley in the hall, whatever it was, or he comes walking by. What did you do? Turn heel on your vacation?
Oh, man, it's great.
It was, but no, there were people that would complain about him, but boy, he was, when I started out, I was hired in the summer of '81. And a couple of months after I got hired, I caught mononucleosis. I was flat on my back for a couple of months. I had it so bad, the doctors thought I had leukemia. I was in really bad shape. And the word came down from Stanley, don't worry about it. Your job is here. Just get better. Heal, come back. Your job will be waiting for you. That's very rare then and now from any boss. So
yeah, it is.
He was very supportive of his staff and smart enough to stay out of the staff's way for the most part. We were making him a lot of money. Hey, PWI outsold Sports Illustrated on the newsstand for a time. They had a few more subscribers than us, but we were riding really high in '83, '84, '85.
Yeah.
And
that's why I call myself the Martin Short of PWI.
Yeah.
John Candy leaves, and here comes Martin Short.
Here comes
With
Marty.
me, it's whoever left the company. Here I come, right at the tail end of the glory years.
And now, like Marty and Steve Martin, you're doing a podcast.
Only
Murders in the Ring.
Well, I will say I'm having a blast doing these podcasts. And I said this a few episodes ago. I don't care if I ever get more successful than I am right now. It's the doing. It's the fun part. The people I'm able to talk to. I mean,
Absolutely. Hey, without this podcast, we wouldn't be talking for
that's right. And we
like this
haven't
for a
seen each
while. Yeah,
other.
we touch base on Twitter and Facebook now and again,
Right.
but it's been
Folks,
way too long.
folks, we haven't talked to each other face to face in years. I want you to
That's
know
right.
this, your listeners out there. Craig and I, like I said, we kind of bump into each other on social media with our snarky comments to each other. But now this is the first time we've had a long conversation, and you're listening to it. You're eavesdropping on us right now.
That's right.
So
Don't tell anyone.
Please be gentle with us. Yes.
We had many a lunch together at Bialystock and Bloom,
Bialystock and Bloom. That's right.
which is no longer there, unfortunately.
I'm sure it's not there. Yeah.
But the bakery across the street from the Rockville Center train station is still there and makes the best black and white cookies.
Oh, that's right.
That
That
I
was a
have
big
had
topic
anywhere.
of discussion in the day.
They should sponsor this podcast.
Is the Bomb Factory still there?
The Bomb Factory.
The deli.
On the corner, yes.
Yeah.
That is still there. Yep.
Yes. I think the
deli on the corner is still there, yes.
The boxing staff used to refer to it as the Bomb Factory. I don't know why. I don't know why.
That is still there.
They called it
I was actually up there
now,
a couple months ago.
Is Sportsset still operating across from the building?
I think they are, yeah. I think they are.
And I know the bowling alley is still up.
Yep. And that was a 5-story building, and Stanley used to say that wrestling built the first 4 floors and boxing built the 5th.
That's right.
So that tells you, relatively speaking, how successful the magazines were for him.
It was. Well, Craig, I don't know what to say other than it has been too long. We're shaking hands pantomime here, folks.
That's right.
It's been way too long, and I really treasured this conversation. I have to edit
this is awesome. I have
to edit it because I had a couple of people walk in during this, so I hope my editing job does it justice, but I'm sure it will. It's good to see you. We did good work, man. I told Stu that upon his retirement. We did good work, and that's really what counts. And I know we entertained a lot of people.
Yes, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we absolutely entertained a lot of people, and we not only did good work, we did good work we could be proud of.
Yes, absolutely. My one regret is that I don't have a whole lot of magazines from those days.
Well, you got to find that there's somebody somewhere with boxes of them on their porch looking for $1.
I certainly hope so. Yeah. But it's what when people find out I am who I am, they come running on social media with PDFs of they make a photo of my old articles. And they always post them. Somebody had a picture of me looking at El Gigante. Remember that one?
Oh yeah. Oh, I love the gag photos we used to do when the wrestlers come up to the office.
Oh yeah, there was one with me and Don Morocco when he came to the office. My one regret is I didn't get to pose back when I was managing editor. Everybody posed with Mil Mascaras. I didn't have time.
He cracked my neck. That was how I found out I had mono. Yeah, I went to the garden, and I was complaining of a stiff neck, and Mascara says, "Oh, I could take care of your neck. Lay down on the floor." And there's photos of it in the magazine. I did a column on it, one of my first on the road columns, and I lay down on the floor backstage at the garden, and he grabs a towel and he said, "Just relax your neck, relax." And I relax my neck and my head, and my head is sort of cradled in the towel. He's holding, one end of the towel in one hand, the other end of the towel in the other hand, and he's sort of rocking my head back and forth. And all of a sudden, he goes snap, like a chiropractor would snap your neck.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, that feels really bad." It didn't get the neck pain, and actually, that's when I found out the neck pain was due to the mono. Couple days after, because Apter diagnosed me. I think you have mono, but Mascaras tried to get rid of it. But
well, all I know is this: for all you fans listening out there of our age group, imagine sitting in your office and Apter would invite all these wrestlers. Imagine sitting there, and here comes Kerry Von Erich.
Yeah.
Here comes Mark Lewin. Here comes Mil Mascaras. Here comes Eddie Gilbert and Missy Hyatt.
Right.
Here comes Dominic DeNucci. Here comes Johnny Rods. Here comes Tommy Dreamer. Here comes Taz. Here comes Don Morocco. And on and on. And on. You never knew who was going to walk through into that office. It was amazing.
Yep.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I never took that for granted. I'm like, who has a job like this?
That's right.
Paul Heyman. All these guys would come
Yeah.
up intermittently. Some of them would come in unannounced. They just show up.
And just the surreal nature of working in that office. The secretary would call back to Bill. Bill, Abdullah the Butcher on line 2.
Yeah, right.
Where else in the world is someone? Maybe in Japan, someone saying that. But
well, we were talking. I think before we recorded it, it's like Bill Apter gets off the phone, and you or somebody else asked him, "Was Kamala there?" His response was no, but Mrs. Kamala says he'll be home at about 6.
Mrs. Kamala.
So it was a job unlike no other, my friend.
It was great. It was great. So much fun.
I'm happy that we got to play and get paid for it.
Yes. Few people get to do that.
It's almost like being on Saturday Night Live. They get to play act and get paid to do it.
Yeah.
We got to dabble in one of our favorite things in the world. We got paid to do it. And I'll tell you what, we're real thankful that we were with this company. At the time, people groused about salaries. Go work for those other organizations, see if you can make a living. You couldn't. Only with Stanley Weston could you make a living in wrestling, in a magazine. There's no question about that. Everybody else I talk to talks about, getting $10 for a photo or $20 for an article. We got paid, man. We did. We got salaries, we got benefits. So anybody who puts Stanley down for being cheap, I don't want to hear about it.
No, and one more quick story about exactly that. This was, and I know exactly when this was. This was the end of '84. Stanley used to, and the magazines were doing great, right? First WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan's breaking wide. We're selling magazines hand over fist, and the company's doing really well. So we used to get our vacation time, but Stanley would pay us for unused vacation time at the end of the year.
Right.
And he would, there were quarterly bonuses that were based on sales and company performance, and those could be pretty good. So end of '84, payday comes along. We get our paycheck. We get our quarterly bonus check. We get our check for unused vacation time. And because the company was doing so well, he gave everybody a second bonus check. And these bonus checks were not insignificant. They could be a pretty hefty percentage of your salary, not well into the double digits, but not in the single digits. So people are walking around with four checks in their hands on payday. You never saw a happier staff of people in your life.
I'm sure.
And that's, he could be generous when he had it. And he was, I never had a bad word to say about Stanley because there were other things I know about him and the way he treated people. You gave one example about when you bought property.
Mm-hmm.
I know a bunch of other stories that are not mine to tell, but he treated his people very well. So yeah, I'm with you. I got nothing bad to say about Stanley.
No, one thing I liked about him, he let us work.
Yeah.
Only rarely did he interject himself into either the boxing or wrestling departments. When he had something serious, he would come and do something. But other than that, we were the staff and he was the owner. And that was it.
Yep.
What's wrong with that? What's worse than a meddling owner? Trust me, I had those.
No one wants to be micromanaged, and he never did that.
No, he trusted Stu. He's trusted you, Bill. I mean, that's where it all started. That was the nucleus right there. And you guys are the legends, and I'm Martin Short. That's all I have to say.
Well, it was absolutely great time sitting here and catching up again. And let's do it again soon. If it doesn't even have to be a podcast, let's you come down to the Philly area. I come up to the New York area. Let's figure it out.
I wouldn't mind it if we did another podcast. I think
let's do it. I'm all in. And let's roll a few frames too.
Yeah, damn Skippy. I'll show you how good I am. And on top of it, we'll pick a topic next time. We'll come up with something that we could, like maybe then versus now. I don't know if you watch anything now, but then versus now is a very good topic on this particular podcast. I have young guys, young journalists, young podcasters come on this program, and they go, "I like the old stuff better because it's more realistic."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've watched any AEW or any of these minor leagues that are on now, but things are getting wacky out there.
Not enough to follow angles, but occasionally I'll tune in and check out a match or two.
Mm. You know what? You know what really affected me too was when I did a podcast about a bonus about Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler getting sick and Jerry Jarrett dying. That hit me hard.
Really?
Because we have less voices now. It's the same way I felt when Buddy Rogers died. We have less voices to teach, less voices to talk about the psychology, less voices to who had standards of professionalism that should be carried on.
When it's a loss of institutional knowledge. Yeah.
When that gets watered down, we're seeing some of the mess we see out there now. People who don't have any sense of any of those things getting into the sport, and it's a mess.
Right.
It's a show. People don't want a show. Wrestling's wrestling. Wrestling should be a show. It should be wrestling.
My sense of it is that the Venn diagram of pro wrestling and backyard wrestling is too much overlap.
Yeah, especially these days. Yeah, especially the last couple of years. Oh, I just did my last podcast. I did. Some woman pushed another woman, female wrestler, pushed her off a balcony, and she hit head first. It looked like on the ring apron, and it looked like she killed the other woman. I mean, it really did. It looked like she really. It was a spot.
I think I might have seen that clip on social media.
Yeah, it was just the last 10 days or so, and I was outraged. And thank goodness, I saw Al Snow talking about it on another podcast, and he was outraged about it too. One of these days, they're going to set up one of these crazy spots, and it's going to be Owen Hart all over again. I don't want to be morbid, but I don't want to see that happen. Pro wrestlers are great athletes. They work too hard. You know how hard it is to even get a spot in an indie show? You know, Cactus, Mick Foley gave up his entire life to learn how to be a professional wrestler and do it right.
Right.
A lot of people today are doing that. Young people are doing that. I don't want to see them get hurt. Is that so wrong? I mean, is that so wrong? I don't mind them doing angles where people get hurt because that's, if you want to make it look convincing, there was always stretcher jobs and stuff like that in wrestling for years and years and years and decades. That's different. But when you watch something that really looks like somebody hurt someone else, it's painful to look at. It's not entertaining. It's disturbing.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's call it the level of violence, so to say, for want of a better phrase. But you look at films of matches from the 50s, right? Arm locks and leg locks, right? But then then things go to it's sort of a trend line, right? Things take to the air. Snuka comes along and he's jumping off the top rope. Now he's jumping off the top of the cage. Holy mackerel, no one's seen that before. Joshin Liger comes along and brings a whole other level of aerial stuff. And then it just goes higher. And, Mick Foley comes along and take ECW, it goes even higher. And, it's sort of a one up. Things go higher and higher and higher. At some point, they just can't go higher anymore.
Right.
I mean, human bodies, there has to be a limit. It's unsustainable to keep going higher. So has the sport reached or passed that limit yet? I don't know. Maybe not.
It depends on how Pavlonian the fans are. The fans always are the boss. I don't care what anybody says. They're the ones buying the tickets and giving the TV ratings.
Right. Give the people what they want.
The fans rule. But if they're educated to expecting fireworks displays at every wrestling card and loud music and, everything changed in wrestling. They didn't have that when you and I started.
Right.
Wrestling match would come on TV. You'd see two guys standing in the ring and then they'd go at it. That was it after the announcements.
Yeah. Now Gorgeous George, holy mackerel. He was a huge outlier. He had a valet.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. Exactly. How dare he? Yes. Right.
Yeah.
What an outrage he was. Yes. But you know what I'm saying though? It's like if you could be taught that you expect fireworks and music at every card, you could be retrained to think that it's more not as violent. I'm watching Impact. Impact had 2 simulated murders on its broadcasts. All right, they wrote off a wrestler recently by stabbing him. I'm serious. Where are we going, folks? I mean, cinematic matches, too. You know what those are? Have you ever seen a cinematic match?
I don't believe so.
All right. Jeff Hardy did, the Hardy brothers did them in Impact. WWE did them with Bray Wyatt. WrestleMania was The Undertaker versus AJ Styles. It's a match on film with musical background, not in a ring. They're chasing each other around graveyard or whatever. It's like
pure production. Yeah,
that's
pure
gonna
production.
kill this stuff like crazy.
Right.
It is. That is 15 steps too far. How does that wrestling should be done in the ring? Don't you think?
It's there. Maybe the goal isn't. Maybe the goal is social media, right? Maybe they're trying to do that 10-second spot that's going to get a lot of likes, that's going to get a lot of shares, that's going to get a lot of attention online, and everything else around it. I don't know. I don't know.
But we have a breed of young fan now that's conditioned to want the huge spot.
Right.
More than when you and I were kids, it was good guy, bad guy. I want the good guy to win. Or I like
it was
the
the
bad
more
guy.
Psychology, right?
Right. Now
the psychology. Now it's the spot.
Who's got the best spots? Who's going to give me a 5-star match? I'm putting my fingers in the air here. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? The whole mindset of the fan has changed completely.
Can it change back? It's a huge question. I don't know.
That's the question for the ages, my friend. And that's why this is the outdated wrestling hour, because you know what? I liked it the old way. I do. I am not unabashed when I say that I think they're trying to kill this thing the way we covered it and the way we enjoyed it, and it bothers me. It just does. It was so good. I mean, you'd see a Bob Orgstrom match and you'd swear what you just saw was real.
Right.
When you watch a guy leap from the top of a turnbuckle onto the floor with 6 guys standing there for 60 seconds waiting for him to come down upon them, how do you think that's real? You don't. Right. It's a performance art.
Exactly.
And I'd rather have people think that's suspension of disbelief. If you lose it entirely, it's just a show. And you can watch a show on Netflix all day long.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to turn on wrestling to watch a show. Wrestling should be its own animal. And there, I'm off my soapbox then. Okay. But
get off my lawn.
I'm passionate. Get off my lawn. You young punks. Just keep going. Yeah. You like the intro. I have fans who love the intro to this show and fans who despise it. I want to know your opinion of our staff announcer at the beginning of the show.
I think he's great. He's my I like him.
Yeah, I do too. I love him.
He speaks from a certain segment of my soul there.
My favorite is the fact that he watches today's wrestling on his 1964 Philco console. I just think that's
the only way.
I love him for that.
I'm a record collector, and I have 2 crank up machines that play old 78s. And hearing those records from the 20s and the teens played through the original equipment, just there's a certain flavor to it that's wonderful. And so I hear where he's coming from. Yeah, I got to watch it on the Philco. It's the only way. It's the only way.
Just the word Philco makes me laugh.
I salute that.
Sorry. I will say that I've given the staff announcer a 5-year contract, and he's not going anywhere. So if anybody still
glad to hear it.
If anybody wants to make fun of my staff announcer, then you go right ahead, because he ain't going nowhere.
Besides, I'm glad to hear that very much.
And by the way, every one of his announcements has lasted exactly 39 seconds. So I don't let him start the rant, because if he starts the rant, he's going to start using 4-letter words, and then the whole thing.
Anybody out there into numerology? I don't know, 39. Well, that's ask him how old he is. I'll bet he'll tell you 39.
I will tell you, as a music fan, you're going to love the next intro for this show. You're going to love it.
Okay, I can't wait.
You're going to love it. So, fans, this has been Craig Peters and Bob Smith, late of Pro Wrestling Illustrated and all the GC London magazines. Victory Sports Series, don't you know? TV Sports, don't you know?
TV Sports.
Didn't they sound nice and official, those little blurbs, right? Victory Sports Series.
I like the little logo in the corner. That was like the Marvel Comics thing in the top left corner of the cover.
Victory Sports Series. Ben Strong. All that. It sounded so official. TV Sports.
Battling Girls.
Battling Girl. All right. You're making me confess this. I've never said this to anybody. I mailed away for my copy of Battling Girls.
Do you still have it?
No, of course not.
Uh,
Back in the day, what was that, late 70s? I sent my $1.25 to TV Sports, Rockville Center, New York, and got my copy of Battling Girls. What you must think of me?
Here's another theme we could dive into if we do this again. All the ads over the years in the wrestling magazines.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because there were some great ones. Were some great ones.
Oh, yeah, the for $1.25, you could eat your companion, right? Blow up companion. Right?
Oh,
so
man.
lifelike. Remember the line? So lifelike, you won't believe your eyes. It's just wow.
Is your poor English holding you back? That's it. What do we got here? No.
Oh, how about? Do you remember that? Did you have the ads? They had the ads where they sold the mutton chops and the fake beards, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was an agency that collected all that sort of stuff, and then they just sent a whole package over to us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then we got some real ads later on, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, great. There's actually a great book, Mail Order Mysteries might be the title. Came out a few years ago. It was all similar to the ads in the wrestling magazines, but it was all this stuff like X-ray specs and sea monkeys and all the stuff that was typically advertised in comic books. And the idea of the book is like they show you the ad, then they show you the actual product that you get from the ad.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes, I saw that.
Oh, it's terrific. Yeah,
it is terrific. But I will say that was one of the great early tragedies. 5-year-old Bob sent his only 35 cents in the mail to Johnson Smith Catalog for a surprise package worth much more, right? Question mark over what looked like a wrapped gift box.
Right. I remember I got a lot of my money. What'd you get?
What I got in the mail was a brown envelope with a number 2 pencil and a penny compass. Little tiny compass, probably 5 millimeters wide, that didn't even work. It just kind of wobbled.
That's a surprise package, all right.
And that was the first time in my life I thought, geez, people will rip you off.
Yeah.
That was deflating when you're 5 years old.
You were like Ralphie discovering that it was an Ovaltine ad.
I was expecting like a boat or, at least a paper airplane, but no, just a pencil. What kid wants a pencil? In fact, I think it was a graphite pencil.
But they sold you a dream. So there was that. Like everything up to the point that you received it, that was great. That was worth the money. Because you had that anticipation and the dream of what it might be.
Yeah, but I was so stupid then. I thought that the gag where you put the $1 bill in the money changer and it came out a $5 bill, I thought that was real.
That really worked, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to order and have lots of money. All right, we're rambling, folks. This is Craig Peters, one of the legends of wrestling publishing. Craig, thank you so much for being here.
It's been fun. It's been real. It's been real fun, and I hope we do it again. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Count on it. Thank you. Hey, are you in the mood for something fun to do with your family? Get together for a fun and exciting time bowling at Harold Lanes in New Hyde Park, New York. Harold Lanes brings back the nostalgic atmosphere of bowling along with its fantastic cafe and bar selections. The food is not your typical bowling alley offerings. Take it from me. That's the truth. The food is delicious. Harold Lanes also offers adult and junior leagues as well as coaching classes for the kids. The kids' birthday parties, fundraisers, and adult parties are always a huge hit. Reasonably priced and conveniently located at 465 Herrick's Road in New Hyde Park, New York, Harold Lanes is open 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to midnight. You need more information? Give them a call at 516-741-8022. That's 516-741-8022 for Harold Lanes in New Hyde Park, New York. Please keep your eyes peeled for social media, our outdated wrestling social media, because I have a lot of news coming up about podcasts I'm going to be appearing on, guesting on, guests that are coming on this podcast, you name it. We have a lot of stuff coming up. So I'm really excited about the way things are going, and I hope you will be too. Our opening and closing theme is Boogie Party by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. You know all the spots to contact us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. We're on Facebook as Robert Smith. Find me on Twitter at Bob Smith NYC. We have our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. You can listen to the show there as well. And I'm just giddy over the fact that we had such a wonderful conversation with Craig Peters here. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Lots of stuff going on. We've only been doing this a little over, I guess, a couple of months now. Thank you all so much for all your support and all the great comments. And I'm having the time of my life when I thought I was done with wrestling. I ain't done with wrestling, kids. We got a lot more to come for you. So until next time, I don't have any great quote for you this week other than to say thank you, Craig Peters, for being there, man. Really appreciate it.